I'd probably make more money off affiliate links if I told you all you should run out and buy some GPUs right now, but honestly, depending on which price point you're looking at, a very good idea would be waiting until at least January 8th before making a purchase, at least if you're buying new and in a certain price class. At this point, the heavily rumored 40 series super GPUs are still not officially confirmed, but now we're actually seeing what looks like an official embargo date time. So when will these cards be announced? When will reviews be available? When will they hit the shelf? This looks pretty official. This is from videocards.com, and when they've had things like this in the past from similar sources, it has been accurate. So it's looking like January 8th, 9 a.m. Pacific time, we will get an announcement of a 4070 Super, 4070 Ti Super, that's a mouthful, and a 4080 Super. With the 4070 Super coming first. As far as unboxing videos, looks like that will also be available January 8th later in the day. And then with reviews available on the 16th and hitting shelves on the 17th. Then it's looking like they're spacing things out a week at a time throughout the rest of January. With basically reviews available on the 23rd for the 4070 Ti Super and on the 30th for the 4080 Super, and hitting shelves a day after reviews are available on each of those. Now, are these going to actually shake up the market? I don't know. It all depends on the pricing. So yes, these will definitely be better than what's currently available from a performance standpoint. The question is NVIDIA going to drop them into the current pricing structure just above their non-super variants? Are they going to slot into the same price point and then they phase out the non-super cards? Or are they going to keep offering the current versions and the super simultaneously? There's a lot we don't know here, but the point is we're less than a month away from this stuff being all out there. So unless you just have to have a GPU before Christmas, if you're targeting anything in the $500 and up category, which is where these are likely to fall, the 4070 is currently priced about $550, then this has a good chance at shaking up that market. Maybe it won't, but it's probably worth waiting. Now, buying used right now could still be a great idea. And today's sponsor, Jawa.gg, is a fantastic place to take a look at that. And not only that, they have a holiday gift guide. They even have a TechTuber gift guide where tech influencers give their picks in a whole bunch of categories. Definitely check this out. But also, not only can you make your dollar stretch farther by buying used, they also can make it incredibly simple to sell your GPU. Click this get an offer button. You can sell your GPU instantly. I know a lot of people who hang on to their graphics cards because they feel like it's going to be a hassle to sell. They're thinking about selling it in person, and they're like, am I going to get mugged for this expensive thing? All of that. Well, check out how easy it is with Jawa. One, get an instant offer. You click that get an instant offer button, follow the link in the video description or pinned comment. By the way, $10 off your first purchase. Another way to get your money to go further. But anyway, tell them about your GPU model and condition for an instant offer. You print a free shipping label and mail them the GPU, so all the shipping's factored into the cost. You don't have to figure out all of that yourself. Inspection, they'll inspect it to make sure everything checks out, and most sellers get paid within 1 business day after the part is received. Good stuff. Again, $10 off your first purchase at Jawa using code OWEN10. Now, if you do want to buy something, let's start in the lower price points where I don't think the incoming Super Series is likely to be as disruptive. Now, if you're buying under $200, I think the RX 6600 should be your primary bet. This coming in from AMD at $190 for the cheapest models and sitting right at $200 for a couple more. Now, another interesting alternative would be Intel's A750 coming in at $195 or $199, very similarly priced. They're both 8GB graphics cards, and honestly, sometimes the Intel card is faster. Intel has been making huge improvements to their support for older games that weren't performing well, but I will still say you will get a more consistent experience with the AMD game support list just because they've had decades of building up those driver support. And if you play more obscure titles, they just might not have been updated to work well on Intel yet. Also, make absolutely certain you have ResizeBAR support on your PC before buying an Intel GPU. They absolutely require it. So I would say both of these would be kind of a split recommendation, but for just ease of use, probably go with the RX 6600. Now, what else? Does NVIDIA have anything in this price point? The closest thing they've got is a 3050 coming in at $220, and I think it gets outperformed by the 6600 and the A750 in a lot of situations for more money. So with that being said, I would go the other route. What about NVIDIA's better ray tracing performance? Doesn't really matter at this performance tier, in my opinion. You're more likely turning down to medium settings on this kind of GPU, which rather than cranking up the ray tracing settings. The only thing I will say is that NVIDIA's DLSS upscaler, if you're going to be upscaling at 1080p, it does look a lot better than AMD's upscaler, although personally I'd rather avoid upscaling at 1080p if possible. But if you were going to upscale at 1080p, NVIDIA's DLSS will be the way to go, so that would be your main justification if you did want to go with the 3050. But I'm going to go with the 6600 in this price point. I used to recommend the 6650 when it was a bit cheaper, but now it's up to $240, and at $240, you have AMD's 7600 for $248 on the cheapest model, and I would pay $8 more for a few percent more performance and an AV1 encoder. You'll get more years of driver support since it's a newer generation. Maybe AMD will do something with its AI accelerators on its cards someday. Who knows? On the newer generation, but. So yeah, if the 6650 goes back to being significantly cheaper than a 7600, I'd probably go that route if you could pay a bit more. Now, I really wish NVIDIA was offering the 4060 closer to this $250 price point. Currently, it's up around $300, and with it being $300 and up, I just don't think it makes a lot of sense versus something like a 6700 XT from AMD, which granted is up to 318 again. It has been as low as 300, but even then, it just has a lot more raw performance than the 4060, plus it has 12 gigabytes of VRAM, and there are cases where 8 gigabytes of VRAM isn't enough for the max settings. And the 6700 XT is often strong enough to take advantage of that, especially if you're pushing up into higher resolutions like 1440p. However, once again, I do think NVIDIA, if you were going to go with the 4060 route, still don't think we're in a heavy ray tracing workload kind of situation where that makes a lot of sense. But I do think oddly enough, if you were going to go to a higher resolution like 1440p, you might be relying on upscalers, in which case the 4060 would have an argument to make for a better looking upscaler if you were going to be relying on upscaling to play on a higher monitor resolution, and that's certainly something to mention. Also, frame generation is in a lot more games for NVIDIA's version of it than it is for AMD's FSR3, although big strides have been made on that recently. Now, so at the $300 price point, I would still give the 6700 XT my nod, just because I really think the 4060 needs to be pushed down closer to that $250 mark to make a lot of sense. Now, past this point, I used to recommend the 6800. You can still find them at $390, but the problem is I've seen them go lower than that during some of the Christmassy, Black Friday-y type sales. So it feels bad to recommend it at $390 when I've seen it for so much lower. Stock on these are drying up a bit. Now, the 6800 is a 16 gigabyte graphics card with a lot of horsepower still in it. It performs very, very similarly to AMD's own 7700 XT, which the lowest models have now dropped in price to $420, although they're more commonly at $440 or $450, $450 being the MSRP. But again, for $390, you're getting a 16 gigabyte graphics card instead of the 7700 XT at 12 gigabytes. And the 7000 series features like an AV1 encoder, which might help for certain streamers, things like that. I don't think is enough of a selling point to sacrifice 4 gigabytes of VRAM and pay more money for basically the same performance. So I do still think the 6800 makes more sense than the 7700 XT. What about cards like the 4060 Ti? The 4060 Ti, the 8 gigabyte model, is available as low as $360 right now, and then goes up quickly to $370 and $390 past that point. And honestly, it's 8 gigabytes of VRAM on a card, powerful enough to maybe be playing at settings where, 8 gigabytes of VRAM might not be able to get you settings that you could otherwise play at. Again, AMD offering the 6800 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, I still think is a better choice. And if you're like, well, just get the 16 gigabyte version of the 4060 Ti, well, that costs $450. Where, in situations where you don't spill over the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, that means you're paying a lot more money versus the 8 gigabyte card. It's just a hard sell. And then the $450 price point puts it up pretty close to something like a 6800 XT. The 6800 XT being a $490 product, but also being a lot faster than the 4060 Ti, even the 16 gigabyte model. So this price point gets a bit jumbled. I almost feel like grab the 6800 at $390 for that 16 gigabytes of VRAM and a good amount of raw performance, rather than anything else stretching up a bit past that point. And then we hit that $500 price point, which used to get you a 7800 XT. They are a $500 MSRP, but they must be selling at that price because currently, if I was buying today, $540 for the cheapest 7800 XT that I can find in stock here, and $550 and up past that point. That makes it a bit harder to recommend over AMD's 6800 XT from the previous generation, which performs very, very similarly. But for $490, you're going to save yourself a good $50 for basically the same performance, still getting 16 gigabytes of VRAM. So I would say at the $500 price point in the current market, I think the 6800 XT still makes more sense at $490. And the 7800 XT needs to get back down to that $500 price point to make a lot of sense. It also makes it hard to recommend over the NVIDIA alternative, which is the 4070. The 4070 coming in at $540 as well on the cheapest models, and then going up to $550. In other words, in the current market, the 4070 and the 7800 XT cost exactly the same amount of money. So which one would you rather have? Well, that's an interesting question. Personally, I would rather have the 4070. So if you are deciding at the $550 price point, I would buy the 4070, but I'd also caution you that it does look like we're seeing a 4070 Super coming in. Where will that be priced? Will it have an impact pushing these prices down? So again, I would just recommend not buying in this price point right now until January. But if you were going to buy right now, like I said, personally, I think the 4070's feature set makes it better for the same price than the 7800 XT. Even though the 7800 XT on average will perform about 6% faster when you're not using ray tracing. I've done some recent Unreal Engine 5 testing, and I saw that the raw performance of the 7800 XT was noticeably better than the 4070 in most situations. However, I'd often want to use an upscaler. And if I'm using an upscaler, the DLSS upscaler looks better. So if I'm playing at 1440p on a 4070, I'm almost always going to use DLSS quality, and that is going to get me a better looking image than using FSR quality. And in that case would be giving me a better experience. Plus, if you're on a high refresh rate monitor and you can already get a high enough base frame rate, which a 4070 usually can, then kicking on frame generation, which a DLSS 3's frame generator is more widely available currently, will often give you an experience that is better to playing with frame generation off. Additionally, if you get into ray tracing features, the 4070 is strong enough that it would often makes sense to enable some ray tracing features. And with that being the case, again, it will often have a performance lead over the 7800 XT. So personally, I would choose the 4070 over the 7800 XT at the same price point. If you're just interested in raw power, no upscaling, not interested in turning on ray tracing and things like that, then perhaps you would prefer the 7800 XT. The other advantage for the 7800 XT is more VRAM, but at 16 versus 12, I think that the kind of settings you'll generally be running on a 4070. I think 12 gigabytes is fine. There's a few edge case games where you can tip past that, and that might become more common in the future. But using things like DLSS, not the frame generation, but the upscaling, can rein in VRAM usage, and you can also, again, tweak a few settings, and often you will be well under that 12 gigabytes if you were pushing up against it. So again, my pick at the 550 range is to wait. But if you are going to buy, I would buy the 4070. Now, past this point, it gets even harder to recommend buying anything because, once again, the Super Series will hopefully be disruptive to this market. The next GPU up from NVIDIA is the 4070 Ti. That's coming in at $775, still a 12 gigabyte card. And then we've got the 7900 XT from AMD coming in at $770. So currently they basically cost the same. And my real issue with this is I'm very hopeful, perhaps my hopes will be dashed, that the incoming 4070 Ti Super could maybe enter in at the same kind of $800 price point, but be noticeably faster than what we're getting with the 4070 Ti, with a bump up to VRAM, which would be the rumor, in which case I think that it would be a better option than what we currently have in this price point. I think that what NVIDIA might be trying to do, at least partially with the Super Series, is currently, the 7800 XT is a little faster in raw power than a 4070. What if I think NVIDIA wants to offer something, that's at least as fast or maybe a few percent ahead on those charts, right? Same thing with the 7900 XT versus the 4070 Ti. I have a feeling the Super version is probably targeted at being as fast or even a little bit faster, even when you're not ray tracing, than the 7900 XT. That's kind of my gut feeling with what they're trying to do here. And same thing with the 4080 Super versus the 4080. It's only rumored to be a few percent faster, but that few percent will probably take the rasterized lead over the 7900 XTX. So I have a feeling that's what they're trying to do here. So I would, again, urge you to wait. However, if you did want to buy right now at this, almost $800 price point, should you get the 7900 XT or the 4070 Ti? The 4070 Ti feels bad to pay $800 for a 12 gigabyte GPU. That being said, at 1440p, as I said with the 4070, there are a few edge cases where 12 gigabytes of VRAM kind of doesn't feel like enough. However, in the vast majority of situations, it is still fine. And again, we're at a strong enough performer here where you might want to be using ray tracing. DLSS at the quality setting, most people would be willing to turn on and use. I know it's not everybody's favorite when I read the comment section. I think most people would be using it. And so I think if you were playing at 1440p, where the DLSS upscaler has a very noticeable image quality advantage, you're strong enough to use some ray tracing. I do think that I probably would lean toward the 4070 Ti at 1440p. At 4K resolution, the 20 gigabytes of VRAM on the 7900 XT plus a bit more raw performance makes it a bit more of a split recommendation, and I could see why somebody might go with the 7900 XT. And also, its upscaler, at the quality setting at 4K, FSR does not look too bad, and probably would be pretty usable for most people. However, on the NVIDIA GPUs, you might be willing to use a more aggressive upscaling setting. So a bit of a split recommendation here at 4K at 1440p. I would maybe hold my nose and grab the 4070 Ti, but in general, my recommendation is just wait. And that brings us to the next price point up. If you go with the 7900, the next GPU up in price is the 7900 XTX. Currently, the cheapest one I'm seeing is $960. Again, not the best prices that I have seen. And performance-wise, the closest competitor is the 4080. The 4080 coming in at $1,150 right now. So it is about $200 more to get the 4080. When you're not ray tracing, AMD can often have a small lead, but it's a small enough single-digit performance lead in most cases that you'd really be hard-pressed to notice the difference, whereas when you're in a heavy ray tracing workload, which the 4080 can often run, especially using its good quality upscaler with DLSS, then you would be more, then you could tell the difference between the two GPUs, if that makes sense. So I do think the 4080 is the GPU I would rather have, and I don't think 16 gigabytes of VRAM is an issue. Also, the 4080 Super, I don't know if the pricing will change at all, but it's not rumored to be all that much faster than a 4080. So if I was buying at this price point right now, again, probably better to wait until January and see what's happening, but I would definitely rather have the 4080. But is it worth an extra $200 to you if you're already paying around $1,000? Well, it depends on the person. Sometimes you can't stretch the budget, or if you're building a new PC, that extra $200 could be spent on getting you a faster CPU. Maybe that gets you up to a 7800X3D, fastest gaming CPU on the market, and otherwise maybe you couldn't afford getting that kind of a thing. I'd rather have the 4080, but you could save $200 and go with the 7900 XTX. So, I'll kind of take the coward's way out here and say the best $950 GPU is the 7900 XTX, and the best $1,150 GPU is the 4080, and if you do have the extra budget, I do think it's worth getting the 4080 over the 7900 XTX. And that leaves us with the 4090, which the pricing on this right now is just ridiculous. The cheapest models are around $2,000 right now, which is way above where it listed at originally. This is likely due to AI restrictions on GPU shipments to China, caused 4090s to get shipped over there before those bans took effect, reducing supply elsewhere in the world and likely forcing pricing up. That's the most reasonable explanation for what we're seeing here. And by the way, I did see some rumors of a 4090 Super, but that seems to be just based on an error that a European retailer, I think it was ProShop, had, and it was just an error. I don't think there's any credible evidence that a 4090 Super is incoming. Anyway, the point is, the 4090 is definitely faster than a 4080. It's also faster than a 7900 XTX. That being said, we're talking, maybe 30% or so faster than those GPUs. And currently, versus something like the 7900 XTX, you are literally doubling the price to get that 30% more performance, but also, all of NVIDIA's features, all of that. It's certainly a really good GPU. And if you've just got all the money in the world and it doesn't really matter what's an extra, if I'm already spending $1,200 on a 4080, what's another $800? If you're the person who's just like, what's another $800? Then sure, throw it at a 4090. It is the best GPU out there. But pricing on it right now makes it not make any sense from a value proposition standpoint. So anyway, that's what I've got for you guys this month. I wish it was better news. And again, I think the used market, take a look at Jawa, especially with that $10 off I can get you with my code OWEN10. You might find something a little more exciting that we're seeing in the new market right now. And again, sell your old GPU to make it stretch your budget even further. And I'll be back with one of these videos next month after we've seen the Super series come out. Allegedly, and hopefully we will have something more exciting to talk about. I hope all of you have an excellent day.